I'm guessing you're bored silly telling your story about how you responded to Colin Kaepernick's, I guess, initial statement to not stand for the anthem. And but I'm going to have to, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to ask you, please, to tell that story again. And the reason I want you to do that, if you don't mind, is it seems to me that maybe you're the most famous exemplar in the world right now of certain principles of discourse, of interacting with human beings that you disagree with. And these are principles that I've kind of been working on a little project to advance. I'm going to be rolling this thing out soon. And it's called Humilitarian. When I heard you speak in Seattle, whatever it was, a few months ago, I was like, that's incredible. And so I'd like you, if you don't mind, Nate, to just kind of tell the salient points of that story. And I'm going to explore a little bit, I think, some of the principles that I think, maybe consciously or unconsciously, you were working on when you approached Kaepernick in that way, and just how you proceeded. Because I think we need a lot more of that in our country, for the good of all of us, right, regardless of race and political persuasion. And so this is going to this problem of tribalism and divisiveness that I think so many Americans feel right now, the idea that politics is stuck, right? So that's what I'm interested in, and that's why I'm interested in you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my background, I spent 10 years in the Army, Special Forces, and then I went back and played football later in life. So being in both those worlds, being in both those type of locker rooms, but also very different, you know, being in combat and playing a sport, I sort of understood why, you know, when he was initially sitting on the bench, why a lot of people were very upset, very hurt by the fact that he wouldn't stand during the anthem because he didn't feel inspired to. And he felt like this country wasn't living up to its promise for equality and justice for all. And but I also, you know, I heard what he was saying, and I understand and believe that our country should always strive to do better. We should always strive to hold, you know, everybody accountable, and no one's above the law. Like we need to feel united on a lot of things, and we just don't these days. It's been pretty disgusting. It's been a tough place to live, not just America, the world right now. It's just,
yeah. And there were polls after polls coming out, I think for the last 3 or 4 years, saying that 70 to 80% of Americans think we're so divided and tribal that our politics is actually making things worse, not better.
Oh, way worse. The two-party system is terrible. It needs to go away. It's tearing us apart because everything is becoming political. It's all one way or all the other way. And with social media adding to that, I mean, this world is like so disconnected. We're not in touch with the planet. You know, we're not in touch with each other, like on a real human level. Everything is just digital, and there's so much anger and hate, and it's just to the forefront all the time. It's just in your face all the time, and it sells, you know. So people are making billions of dollars off of this, and it's disgusting. And it's just like, and we just lost who we are, and we're destroying ourselves. We're going to destroy the entire civilization. You know what I mean? If we just keep going down this track, it's just we're on a massive race towards destruction.
Yeah, it's like the red lights are flashing, and I think that's why I kind of developed this humanitarian idea, because I kind of feel what you feel. Now, when you say that, Nate, I know that a lot of people, maybe conservative, liberal, none of the above, kind of are going to be nodding, yeah, it's really bad. But they can't actually do what you did in your approach to Kaepernick. They can't, you know, be the change that they want to see.
No, they can be. They just don't want to be. They absolutely can be. Yes, anybody can be. It's not hard. It's not hard to just shut your mouth and listen to people sometimes, you know, and understand that your views are your views because of your experience. You know, no one else knows what it feels like to be you, and you don't know what it's like to feel like to be anybody else. And so, you know, that arrogance that we all have, that we just think what we feel is right and what we feel is the only way, is it's so dangerous, and it's so stupid. You know, we're so much smarter than that. And I mean, at least we should be, just to understand, like, you know, we don't always agree with each other. We don't always like one another. But it's like a choice to sort of love one another and just try to empathize and give somebody a chance and just hear out the why of what they're talking about and not so focused on the what all the time.
You know, one of the Humilitarian principles is actually on the website that we're gonna, that's gonna be up very soon. Is that the experiences of other people are data, are information. We can't just ignore them because they don't conform to our views. And another one is to judge ideas without judging the people who have them. And I think, this is what you're talking about as the remedy. And I think this is what you brought in your conversation with Kaepernick, right? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I was hurt by him sitting on the bench during the anthem too. Those symbols are very special to me. I've carried caskets draped in an American flag, you know what I mean? And when I hear the anthem, I get emotional, and so that I didn't want to see him doing that. But when I listened to why he was doing it and his reasoning, and I understood, I agree with what you're saying. I agree with us trying to do better and us still striving towards ultimate equality and all that, because we're not perfect. We have a long way to go as a world, not just a country. And so I wrote this open letter to him explaining my experiences, but also saying, look, I'm interested in hearing more about yours. And, I look forward to the day you're inspired to stand again when the anthem's played, and I'll be standing right there next to you. And I'll try to do what I can to be a part of that change as well along the path. He ended up reaching out to me and he wanted to meet. So I went down to San Diego the next day. They were playing the San Diego Chargers in their final preseason game. And we sat in the lobby of the team hotel and we just talked about our backgrounds, our experiences, why we feel the way that we feel. And we agreed on almost everything, and he had a great respect for the military. He said, it's nothing to do with that. And along with that, he asked me, do you think there's another way I can demonstrate that won't offend people in the military besides sitting? Because I told him, sitting just looks like you're sitting it out, or you don't really care. You're kind of making it about you because you're isolated. And so he asked me that, and I said, I think being alongside your teammates is the most important thing on the sideline at that time. But if you're committed to not standing, I think a good alternative to show that you're at least willing to adjust and listen as well would be to take a knee. And he agreed. He thought kneeling was actually more powerful than sitting. And that's where that kneeling started. That's where it came from, that conversation, that suggestion. And, that night I stood next to him as he knelt, and some fans in the stands booed during the anthem, which was much more hurtful to me than anybody ever kneeling. Right. And, now it's 4 years later and we're back in another election year. This was just 2 months before the election between, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Now it's going to be Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And once again, this divisiveness and this hateful rhetoric and lack of understanding, lack of listening is just incredibly damaging. And the parties aren't helping because they're feeding into it. Media is not helping because they're feeding into it.
Yeah.
And it's up to us as citizens, as people, as human beings, to move past that. To be bigger than that. And we've got to do a better job of finding the right leaders, and we've all got to do a better job of following the right leaders too.
If we stopped accepting leadership from people that do the opposite of what you did when you reached out to Kaepernick and the way that you did that, we could, at least in theory, solve this pretty quick. It's because these leaders who are divisive and tribal have all this support in their zero-sum game. You didn't have a zero-sum attitude with Kaepernick, right? You went in looking for a constructive way forward, a way of improving a situation, a way of helping him do what he wants to do that doesn't have a downside for people with views closer to yours or experiences closer to yours. You were respecting the difference in experience and difference of perspective. So all of that is kind of what Humilitarian is about. But you said at the beginning, anybody can do this, but so many of us don't. Like, so many of us are complaining about this problem, would describe it maybe even as you've described it, but then they go off and they get into their Republican tribe or Democrat tribe or whatever tribe it is, and then the system just gives them the two evils. They can pick the lesser one because that's all there ever is. They don't break out. Why do you think that is? And was it hard for you when you felt that pang when you first saw Kaepernick sitting on that bench to kind of, as it were, center yourself and reach out in that very humane, productive, constructive way?
I think it's ego. You know, I think it's we don't want to admit that we might be wrong or that our way isn't the best way. You know, everybody's afraid of that. Everybody's afraid to fail, and they're afraid to concede anything. You know, and we're just obsessed with winning. Obsessed. Everything's about winning, being right. You know, I mean, like, it doesn't make you feel any better. Maybe momentarily when you like, I was right, but it doesn't improve your quality of life. It doesn't improve the world around us. And yeah, I mean, just the anger and constant rage. Like, I get angry a lot, man. I get pretty upset, and I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to be better with that. You know,
this isn't
just relax and breathe a little bit. But people don't breathe, man. People don't. Right. They don't listen. They don't just relax and just, you know, everybody's like waiting for their turn to chime in and tell them why you're right, tell them why they're wrong, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I hear. You know, I've shown this Humilitarian project to a few people, and the only kind of, I don't even want to call it objection, but like unease comes in this form, right? So Humilitarian is about these values and views that we're discussing here. But some people say, yeah, but, like, I love it, but when you see such evil coming from this person or this party or the other side, you have to call it out. And I get that, because we do need to be honest when we see something that we find to be immoral or despicable even. But I try and answer that by saying, okay, that's all well and good, but then what? What do you do then? Because you can just stand in the opposition and feel better because you're right and they're wrong and you've taken your stand. But actually, is just calling out evil when you see it, or just a wrong view when you see it, is that really taking a stand at all? That is just something we do to stroke our egos usually, isn't it? If we stop there, then we're not going to make the country any better. We're not going to get out of the thing that we might, depending on our view, think is so bad that needs changing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that sounds complicated. I think it's simple. I think it's just like just talking about stuff constantly and debating stuff will never change anything. We'll never fix anything. We have to
you
like
just said
go
what
backwards.
I said in one sentence.
I mean, we have to go way backwards and like go back to like what life, what's important about life, what's important about quality of life and happiness for one another, right? Like what, you know, what truly brings us together. A lot of times it's like trauma, you know, really like 9/11 brought us together. And we don't want something like that. Of course, we don't want that to happen. A lot of lives were lost. You know, COVID-19 is been a struggle, and it's very traumatic, like what's happened to the country and to people and all that. But these are opportunities for us to like come together and wrap arms around each other and stop worrying about our differences, you know, in beliefs and economic levels and education and any of that stuff. And just remember that we're all made of the same matter. We're all made of the same stuff. We are all connected. You know what I mean? We're all human beings. We're all part of the same race, and we need to I mean, there's no other animal that has war like this. You know what I mean? That fights like this all the time. And I'm someone who went to war. You know, I'm a combat veteran, and I'm not saying I'm an anti liberator. Like, I think when there's injustice in the world, people need to fight against it for sure. But there's different ways to fight against it. You know, it doesn't have to always be violence or anger or rage and hatred, because it's really hard for people to listen when they're spoken to in that way, and to feel like they want to own any of that if somebody's accusing all the time. You know what I mean? So we've got to find more creative ways to get that message across. It's much like if you were, raising children. I mean, if you're the type of parent, the type of disciplinarian that is always saying, don't do that, stop, no, instead of like encouraging the right practices, encouraging the right behavior, steering each other into this direction of positive, instead of like pushing them by throwing negative at them all the time. And that's like that's what we got to change. That's like first and foremost, just the way that we treat each other. We just don't. We're not treating each other like human beings. We're treating each other like another species. We're treating each other like like an alien force is coming to destroy us all. And I know it may feel like that in some ways to people, but most people are generally good and are doing what they think is best for the world, for the country, for their family, to feel safe, secure, all those things. It may differ from what your view of it is or my view of it, but that's generally what most people are trying to do, in my opinion. I don't think there's that many bad people in the world. There are some, but I don't think there's that many. I just think there's confused people. I think there's hurt people. And they're reacting to that pain with anger, with frustration, with rage, and and then we're reacting back with that same thing, and it's just this terrible cycle, and it's killing us.
You're talking about a kind of defensive, self-protective instinct that people come with, right? When they feel that someone's coming at them, and the interesting thing is, as you explain that, I've got to believe that most people who might be listening to this can think in their own experience, go, yeah, Nate's right. Yeah, of course. And yet they forget it, right? Or we forget it so many times.
Like, it's so simple.
Right. It's literally
it's not a complicated thing. It's just like humility. It might not be easy to approach a situation with humility, but like, it's not a difficult thing. I mean, it's not a complicated thing. It's very simple. It might be difficult, but it's not a complicated thing. All you have to do is understand that, and really believe that you don't know everything, and that you don't have all the answers, and that your way isn't the only way, and you're not just this perfect thing, and everybody else is imperfect, and why can't they be more like you? Why can't they be more like this and that? Because when you really look at yourself, we all have insecurities and things we want to change about ourselves, things we don't like, things we wish we were better at. We all have that, but we don't want to admit that to anybody else because it looks like weakness, instead of the realization and understanding that that's actually strength. It's much stronger for someone to say that I can't do this by myself. I need help. I don't know how to handle this situation. I don't really understand where you're coming from, and I want to learn. All those things that's much stronger than just showing toughness and like putting this front on of you're just invincible and everything, and you've got an answer for every but like you're just discussing. That's great to be that prepared, I guess. But it's not going to change anybody else's opinions. It's not going to make them want to listen to you if you're acting like that. And that's just it. We're not approaching situations with the mindset of I want to learn, I want to listen. It's I want to tell, I want to prove my point.
The reason I was smiling as you were expounding on that, and I love it, thank you, Nate, is that for some reason there are a few NFL players who have endorsed this humanitarian idea, and one of the guys in the NFL, not a player, but someone who does personnel, is a guy called Randy Mueller, and he's worked with the Seahawks and the Saints and so forth. And when he encountered the Humilitarian, one-pager, the thing that jumped out at him, one of the principles was, there's something I do not know, the knowing of which could change everything. And you just said that in your own way. And like, that is the way in. You're right, that is all you need, right? That's the nature of the humility. And actually, that reminds me, Randy also said that this idea, these kind of principles remind him of the huddle on a football field. When the guys have to get down and work something out, they've got a goal, it's a shared goal, and it doesn't matter where you are on the field, doesn't matter the color of your skin, doesn't matter what you believe, it's getting the job done and pulling together, focusing on the commonality, the common purpose. And his thought was, this is almost like saying that what we need is a huddle for all of America. And what we're trying to do is make our politics more like an effective huddle, which it didn't mean much to me because I'm not a football guy, but he explained it. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. When you said about you just had that conversation with Kaepernick, and it was just two guys talking, it's great. There obviously, though, was enough trust to have that conversation. I'm thinking, and I guess what motivated my earlier questions, is that when people sit down, let's say, to talk about contentious issues, like Black Lives Matter or just like Democrat, Republican, there's this trust that makes it harder for them just to sit down as two people and have a chat. Do you know what I'm talking about? What do you say to that? How can you help with that? With getting over.
Well, why is it harder? Why do you think it's harder?
I think it might be something to do with that people feel that they're being judged, that they feel that they can't trust the moral intent of the person that they're talking to. I think it's fundamentally a kind of a distrust thing. And it's a moral distrust.
Well, I mean, we are all being judged at all times. There's nobody, and we're all judging at all times. Anybody that says, "Oh, I don't judge people," I don't judge, that's BS. Everybody judges. You can't help that. Okay. That's just human nature. What you can help is the way that you react to that judgment, and that self-talk and self-awareness and understanding that, like, well, that's just a judgment. That's just my my self-conscious, I guess, reacting to what I see, what I hear. I mean, I made incredible judgments about Colin Kaepernick when I saw him sitting on the bench first, without really listening to why, because it's a very personal thing to me, and it's a very visual sentiment that he was making, and it was very controversial in a lot of ways. So of course I'm going to judge. So I think understanding that you're being judged as well, and that people probably feel the same way that you do about the potentially the lack of trust and lack of understanding, but also just like the way you're approaching a situation. Like, are you approaching it with force? Are you is your intention to intimidate through a conversation? Because if that's the intention, like, of course they're not going to listen to you. The other person's not going to want to hear you out. And if you feel intimidated, you're not going to want to engage as well. So that's one thing. I mean, we're just so combatant, and we show up with all defense mechanisms prepared, and all our weapons are drawn, and it's like, let's go to war, and it's a societal thing. It starts from way up high in political positions, and it continues on through what we see and hear on TV and in the media. I mean, there's just a lot of violence, there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of discourse, and that's all that's being pumped into us, into our veins, through the cell phones and the laptops and the TVs and and it's just like, it's insane. It's mind numbing. It's not human. I mean, like this, it's just, I don't think it's the way this world was intended to be. And it's definitely not, because look what it's doing to us. I mean, we all feel it. Everybody feels we're not in a good place. And it's, or most people. And it's just, I don't know how much longer we can last like this. At least in our current state. I mean, we're not gonna we're not gonna make it unless we make dramatic changes.
No, absolutely. No, but see, this everything you just said, that made complete sense. But I'm running this story like in my head, what you're telling me. There was a moment when you noticed that you had that visceral reaction against Captain. You had that judgment, but you took responsibility for it, right? You could have carried on coming from that place, but you didn't, because you knew that that wouldn't be effective. You knew that if you wanted to get some good done, you had to recognize what was going on, own it. It wasn't his fault, it was your responsibility. And then you put that in its place. You know, you weren't denying it, you didn't know you felt it. That maybe is the thing that takes effort that's hard for people to do, right? That's a choice you have to make. And then there's that kind of emotional effort of the follow through. That's hard for people, but it's necessary, isn't it?
Yeah, but it just goes back to the same thing we've been talking about. It's just, you have to swallow your pride.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to do it. It's that simple. We tell it to our kids, you know, we tell them things like money doesn't buy you happiness. All you need is love, you know, all these things, but we don't practice it. We don't believe it. And young people respond to what they see and hear much more than what they're told. You know what I mean? That's how they're led. Yes. And it's not just young people. That's just everybody. And I mean, it's just that simple. It's like this incredible belief that we are supreme in some way to another person or to another culture or tribe or whatever it is, just because we're maybe more technologically advanced or something. Mm-hmm. You know, we look down on subconsciously, we might admire, but we also look down on less developed cultures and societies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As like, they're less of a person. They're less, you know, it's not real to me. I don't relate to that because I've never seen or experienced something like that. And it just seems so foreign that I can't even consider that human almost. And,
you know, that is actually, I think, a sentiment to your earlier question to me, that, you know, people on one side of the political spectrum have for the people on the other side of it. They can't relate to them as human beings. It's like they have a kind of a moral or an intellectual condescension, right? Because they're so other. They don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not just other cultures we look down on. I think we look down on we do look down on people with other opinions, right? You've been, I'm keeping an eye on the time. I don't want to keep you too long, Nate, but I know that you've been dealing with the media quite a lot recently because of this story, right? You've been approached quite a lot.
Yeah.
How does that feel for you? Do you feel that that's that you're being able to do good by telling this story, so that people can see this kind of, I think, other way that you showed there in the microcosm with Kaepernick? Are you an optimist right now or a pessimist?
I'm trying to be optimistic, but if I'm being completely honest, I'm a bit pessimistic. Yeah, you know, and that's not a good place to be. I don't want to feel like that. I definitely have hope that we can get out of this. We can change, because I think the human spirit's pretty incredible. I've seen us rally before, and I know we can. I just don't exactly have the answers as to how yet, you know, and I mean, nobody does, or we'd be doing it, I think. But I just, I think we've got to put down our weapons first, man. We've got to we've got to surrender a little bit to the fact that we are just killing each other. We're destroying this place, you know, and it's very toxic. It's very dangerous, and it's not very inspiring to see that the way that we treat each other, the way that we handle these conversations and situations and discourse. You know what I mean? It's not constructive the way that we're dealing with it. And so I think we will get out of this because we have to. But I would rather see us get out of this because we want to. You know? Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And, that's what I want to see. That's what inspires me. That's what makes, you know, gives me hope about this country. I think that's possible. I just, I don't know how. I wish I did.
No, I mean, and none of us do, and all we're doing, I guess, is the little piece of it that we can do, or that we think we can do, right? It's what you're doing, and in a small way, it's what I'm doing. Do you think that, I mean, now, you know, with as I said, I mentioned Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd thing, there's an immense sense of division. Do you think that that's causing people to notice more that we need to step up and solve the problem? Do you think it is causing us to solve the problem, or are we still getting worse before we can get better?
No, I think that I don't think that's making anything worse, for sure. You know, I think it was powerful to see people come together like that. It was frustrating to see a lot of the media focus on the unimportant and minority situations that are more volatile, more extreme, more like kind of outlandish and hard for me to kind of wrap my head around. Like some of the situations in, you know, in Portland and Seattle and places like that, where it was like, you know, it was largely white people, and you know, it sounded like a bit of a coerced message in some ways, or changed and like turning into something that it's not. It seemed more about anarchy and less about a specific situation, a specific issue regarding police brutality, you know, and racial inequality. It turned into something a little bit more. So like when you know, that was what kept getting focused on.
Yeah.
That and the, you know, and the mass rioting and looting, instead of like the peaceful, powerful protests that so many people were involved in, and the message behind what they were doing. So it's very convoluted and confusing, and you see that too on the other side. You know, when people that are big, you know, Trump supporters, for instance, that get involved in these protests and whatever, it's like it's a very extreme viewpoint, and it's like sort of skewed through the media that these are the massive populations of the United States. You know, these are, and it's not. Like, I think probably that you said 70 to 80% earlier. I think that's about the number of people that are pretty moderate, pretty understanding.
Yeah.
You know, they agree with some things, they disagree with other things. They agree with pieces and parts of a movement. You know what I mean? And they agree with the why, not always the what, not always the exactly how.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just like, it's hard to sift through that, because that's all you see. You don't see any moderation. Like, moderation won't get clicks.
Yeah.
It won't get, you know, people watching, the ratings go down. So like, those are all businesses, you know, cable news, the media, it's a business. It's a profit business, for profit. Like, they're not there to report. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're there to get you to watch and to stay watching and to click, and to, you know, they feed off fear and anger, and so of course they're going to feed you fear and anger.
Yeah.
So that, you know, you believe that that's all there is out there, and that's what it feels like, and it does feel that way, and it's really sad. It's really frustrating, you know.
My belief, I think we'll close this out. But my belief is that one of the reasons we keep feeling this way and we think it's this bad is because that 70 and 80% of moderate, decent, don't want to be part of the problem people. They've got no way of identifying each other and having this trustful discourse. And that's really the fundamental reason I coined this word humanitarian. I want that 70 and 80% to say, we're humanitarian, which means we might disagree, but we can have a discourse on these principles, right? In the spirit that you've been talking about, Nate, which is why I'm so grateful for you, again, for your being here and giving me this time. And especially, thanks, as I said, for doing it on video, especially appreciate that. And you've given me so much wisdom, and hopefully you've given thousands of people some wisdom, because hopefully thousands of people will watch this.
I don't think I did that. Maybe I gave him something to think about. I didn't give him wisdom, though.
Well, you're a
we already
guy.
we have wisdom. It's in there. It's inside of all of us. Like, we have that.
There you go.
It's our choice to act. It's our choice to access it and utilize it. You know, It's up to us. We have to do that. We have to make that conscious choice. You know, to be bigger, to be bold, and with boldness comes humility. You know.
Humility, Humilitarian, love it. That's why we called it that. Thank you, Nate. Thanks for everything you're doing,
Thanks, Rob.
not just in this realm, but also with the vets and the players, and everything you continue to do, and you know, putting out this message in your special way. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Bye.